You have been invited to take part in an interview as part of your college application, and now you don't know what to do. How do you prepare? Well, you've come to the right place. My name is Craig Meister. I'm a college application expert, college admissions coach. You can learn more about me at collegemeister.com. Also, how you can work with me at collegemeister.com. Today, we're going to talk about interviews as they fit into this whole college application process. They have changed, interviews have over the years. They've been somewhat relegated to a less important position in the overall college application process than, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that's for a lot of reasons that can be chalked up to, I guess, the euphemism of institutional priorities, which is a fancy word of a way of saying politics. But let's talk about why interviews are still worth your while. Whenever you get invited to an interview, I strongly recommend that you take part in an interview. Now, not even the word interview is spared in our world today. There is at least one institution that will remain nameless on this video that has now called them conversations. They're no longer interviews, they're conversations. And whatever the institution that has invited you to take part in this thing calls this thing, they're interviews. They're interviews. Now, whether or not they are informational interviews versus evaluative interviews, now that is an open question. But frankly, it doesn't even matter either, because you should always, when you're putting yourself out there, know that you're being judged. Whether or not the judgee or the judge likes to admit it or not, you're being judged, you're being evaluated, you're being assessed. And so even if an interview is officially only informational versus pure, overtly evaluative, you should comport yourself in a manner and where you feel like you're being evaluated and you're performing to the highest standard possible in order to knock that interview out of the park. So let's give a couple definitions. For many years, particularly selective colleges and universities have offered something known as either an evaluative interview or an informational interview as part of the application process for first-year admission, formerly known as freshman admission. See, they keep changing the words. They keep changing the words because that's what they do. But an evaluative interview, obviously, if you look at the root here, evaluate, is very overtly telling you, the interviewee, that you are going to be evaluated. And at the end of the interview, the person interviewing you, whether it's an admissions officer, whether it's a member of the alumni community, whether it's a student, they're going to conduct some formal evaluation of your performance, and that's going to go into the overall decision-making process of whether or not you are accepted to that college or university or not. Usually that comes in the form of a write-up or of a checklist form or something. So any college that invites you to interview, where they're very direct about the fact that it's an evaluative interview, you need to prepare for that interview. And you need to be on your best game for that interview, because that performance that you give during that interview will be potentially impacting your chances of getting in. And it's very direct. Everyone's very transparent about that when they chalk it up as, or sell it as, or market it as an evaluative interview. An informational interview often ends up being evaluative too, even though they officially are not. But an informational interview is just where they say, oh, we want to have a conversation with you, a member of our alumni community or a member of our admission staff or a student on our campus and our volunteering in our office. We just want to have a conversation, a give and take. Let's have a give and take of information. We'll share a little bit of information. You'll share a little bit of information. We'll learn about each other. It will be good for both of us. And you're not in any way being judged. Everything's fine. And there's not going to be a write-up about you in your application file. Now, and that could all be true in the sense that officially speaking, there's not going to be a write-up about you. It's not going to be officially factored into your number of points earned before they determine whether or not you're accepted or rejected. But if you do well in an informational interview, whether it's with an admissions officer, whether it's with a member of the school's alumni community, whether it's with a student paid or unpaid on campus, if you do well and you knock it out of the park, that helps you. It helps you're confident. It helps you learn how to do better interviews in the future. And it very well could, in an off the books type of way, still help you get in, because whoever conducted the interview could like you more. They could say something in passing to an admissions officer in the office, or they could write a little note and say, even though I know it wasn't evaluative, this guy was really impressive, or this young lady was really awesome. So I mean, it greases the skids a little bit, So you should still try to do your very best, and don't just slouch your way through an informational interview just because you've heard it's informational, or you've read it's purely informational, you're not being judged. You should still prepare to do your very best in such an interview. And then there are these conversations, which one school in particular has debuted in the 2023-2024 admissions cycle. Again, this was a school that previously gave evaluative interviews. Now they're making a real point to underscore the fact that they're not even interviews anymore. They're just conversations. So that's just a fancy way of saying they're just an informational interview. It's just a give and take a conversation. And again, even in that situation, I would say be on your A game. Try your very best to impress, but also try your very best to sort of read between the lines. They're calling it a conversation because they want it to be a back and forth. They don't want you to feel, as the student, the applicant, that you're in the spotlight on the stage all alone. They want there to be questions that you can ask to the interviewer. So this brings up a really good point, and it's true of a conversation, it's true of an informational interview, it's true of an evaluative interview. If you're really going to do your very best work in an interview, and you're going to really feel confident leaving the interview knowing that you've done an amazing job, you always want to treat the interview as a conversation. You really do. So, I mean, we can joke about the fact that one school has changed the name of their interviews to conversations, but that's how I've always prepped students for their interview, that this has to be a strong, healthy, robust conversation. And how do you have a good two-way conversation? Well, the most important way in my mind is to keep making eye contact with that person, give direct answers that show your personality, but also a part of that is making sure that you come prepared to ask questions of the interviewer. You get to interview the interviewer. So it's a two-way street here. And the best type of questions, I always say, to ask an interviewer are the questions in search of an opinion. And so what do I mean by that? You're not going to ask the interviewer what she majored in at that college. Or you're not going to ask the interviewer how many dorms are co-ed versus single sex at that college. Those are questions in search of a fact. You want to ask a question in search of an opinion. And the type of question I'm talking about here is, when it comes time for that interviewer to say, so Janie, do you have any questions for me? You should reply, well, absolutely, Mr. Interviewer. Yeah, absolutely, Dr. Interviewer. Absolutely, Miss Interviewer. I was curious, since I know you went to College X, what was your favorite part of your undergraduate experience? Or you could ask, did you have a favorite professor while you were there? Or do you have a favorite memory? Or if you could do it all over again, would you return to that school as a first-year student, or would you major in the same thing? These are all questions in search of the person's opinion or feelings that, of course, are very unlikely to be things that you would have been able to glean about the student or the interviewer before you actually engaged in the interview. So you never want to open yourself up to asking a question that you really should have learned the answer to beforehand. Whereas if you're searching for someone's opinion, in most cases, those opinions are privately held and therefore are great fodder to come up and be raised to the fore, as they say, in an interview. And it also gets the endorphins flowing in the minds of the interviewer, thinking about the happy times back at that college if they're an alumnus, or even if they're just an employee at that school and never went to that school. Asking that person's opinion makes them feel good. They pump up their chest. They feel like, oh, this person is seeking my thoughtful opinion about something. They feel good about themselves, that someone is looking up to them as a mentor. So this is another really great reason to have strong questions in search of opinions at the ready, so that you can have a strong conversation and not just feel like you're just sitting there waiting to be attacked by questions that you're scared of the entire time. You should feel confident and comfortable asking the person questions as well, because that makes the conversation more lively, more exciting, more dynamic. Beyond that, I've done previous videos about interviews. I'll link them below. So I occasionally come back to this topic, and I encourage you to watch my previous uh, videos about how to make the most of an interview, or how to ace an admissions or an application interview as part of your college application process. I've brought up this topic many times before, but especially if you're a well achieved individual, I definitely recommend bringing, if it's a face-to-face in-person interview, 2 copies of your extracurricular resume, one for you, one for the interviewer. You give it to the interviewer in the beginning. They may just look at it, glance at it once, and put it down and never look at it again. But they may say, oh, I see you were on the lacrosse team. I was on the lacrosse team back in the day. Or, oh, I see you're in the acting troupe. I was an actor back in the day, or my son was, or my daughter is. And so it can really spark, again, a more robust, exciting, personal conversation, so that this doesn't feel like you are just in the spotlight answering questions from a person you'll never meet again, and you feel very stressed about it. You don't want to be stressed. Again, part of my goal for you is not to be stressed. Enjoy this process, but also you'll be more likely to do well in the college application process at every turn, but particularly during an interview or a conversation, if you are not stressed and enjoying yourself. And so these are just some of the tips I would give you in order to make sure that you understand whether or not it's a conversation or an evaluative interview or an informational interview, or they call it a donkey. I don't care. Whatever it might be. If you're having a conversation with a representative of the institution, you want to perform well. You want to make eye contact. You want to give complete answers. You want to be truthful. You want to, if you're in person, smell good. You do want to make sure you've flossed. I mean, there's some basic etiquette things that in our world today that maybe students could do a little bit better at, because they're so isolated all the time. So these are some basics. And I can do more videos about this in the future if you like this topic. But since this video is being produced in early January, which is the beginning of regular decision interview season, I felt like I would circle back to this topic today to make sure that you understand that you want to prepare for an interview as much as you can. You never want to memorize lines for an interview. You want to educate yourself about the institution beforehand. You want to educate yourself and reflect with yourself about why this institution is of interest to you. You want to also maybe do a little research into the person interviewing you, if that information is provided beforehand, so that you can come into the call, if it's virtual, or the actual interview in person, if it's in person, ready and able to engage in a robust conversation that will be memorable, enjoyable, and edifying for all participants in this interview. My name is Craig Meister. Again, if you are interested in learning more about how you can work with me throughout the college admissions and application process, you can go to my website, collegemeister.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and stay stress-free throughout your college admissions and application processes.